Bishop and the Council Roundup,
where each and every Wednesday morning we review what happens at the Springfield City Council meeting so that you can wake up and know what's going on in the capital city, where while you may not live here, you likely, if you're listening on the radio, you travel to Springfield and you spend your tax dollars in Springfield. So what happens at City Hall? I think it's important for a lot of people to understand. It also, I think, gives you, who may be listening elsewhere, a bit of perspective on what to look for at your city council meetings. It is the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. Their downtown location open for lunch. Also open for lunch on Saturdays, and don't forget about delivery, Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to Head West. All right, so yesterday was the full city council meeting where you had aldermen take a whole bunch of different votes on different things, but before that, they had a presentation with members of the Lutheran High School where they announced, hey, they got some pretty big wins with their volleyball team, so a proclamation there. You also had Justine Peterson, who is a grant originator for the city. They help with a bunch of different grants for small businesses, housing, counseling, a bunch of different dollars that were released, so they provided a bit of an overview there. So one thing I did want to do is, I wanted to kind of just give you that overview of some of the things that happened up front, which included final approval of ordinances to deal with the redevelopment of Poplar Place. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to go to help redevelop an area that needs a lot of assistance when it comes to housing development. So they approved that, but then they went on and got into a controversial issue. One of those issues being how debt is dealt with at City Hall, and in particular, who has the authority to essentially wipe away around $250,000 in fees and penalties for a large corporation who may be late on their utility bills. So this was something that came up kind of unbeknownst to me that it was going to be an issue, because I didn't look at the entire agenda beforehand. But here's Mayor Jim Langfelder with an ordinance that's up for first reading, and that means that they're putting it on the agenda so that they can have it on first reading for next week when they ultimately are able to point this ordinance to final passage or to remain in committee. What exactly is it? Well, it deals with something we don't get too often. It's rare that they move to release the audio tapes of a closed-door executive meeting where they go into executive session to typically deal with pending litigation. But this was a meeting that happened back in November of 2021.
A motion to suspend with the rules and place on first reading agenda number 2023-050, resolution authorizing the release of the minutes and audio recording of the November 2nd, 2021 executive session for the City of Springfield Council. City Council.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion?
Yep.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Is there any unfinished business come before the council?
Well, don't get too far ahead, because I think a lot of people want to sound off on releasing executive session minutes from a meeting that happened back in 2021. And a lot of this is because of what ultimately transpired in an Illinois Times article by one of my colleagues, former colleague, Scott Reeder. He put this together. It's called Debt Disagreement. And if you get a chance, this was published a couple of days ago. He goes into how the Wyndham City Centre had $243,000 in utility charges waived by the mayor, and goes into how the mayor's challenger, former or current city treasurer Misty Busher, is looking to pass an ordinance that would control such things to make sure that one person can't just completely waive this debt. So an interesting article goes into some more detail, in particular how Langfelder's corporation counsel, Jim Zirkle, is on there talking about a meeting, closed door, where they discussed this back in 2021. And Zirkle said, in quotes, the consensus was to get as much as possible. The hotel potentially might go into foreclosure or worse. Well, the hotel has not gone into foreclosure, and here we are now talking about who has the authority to waive $250,000 of debt. So you have Springfield Alderperson Aaron Conley raising some substantial questions about this.
I'd like to know why there was a news story about an executive session that was, there were details about this particular meeting in the media this week, and I didn't release them. I don't remember this council acting on that, and I certainly disagree with the way council was portrayed in those comments. So how was that allowed to happen? Are we allowed to just kind of give summaries of exec session? Because my understanding is that we keep that confidential until it's been released by full council action.
Connolly continues with wanting some answers.
Have an informational only conversation and then have that is supposed to be kept confidential due to very strict limitations, and then hear a summary, which I disagree with the summary, come out in the media later.
Now, Corporation Counsel Jim Zirkle, he also responding to this because he was quoted in the article as ultimately saying that there was a consensus at that closed-door meeting.
There had been a discussion, I think, in the media with council members making comments about the executive session, and then you had asked why the mayor commented on it.
So Corporation Counsel Zirkle saying that, making a rationale for why he decided to provide comments to the Illinois Times about this. But we have more going back and forth here. Again, here is Alderwoman Conley.
My concern with this particular meeting and the comments that came out in the Illinois Times are that it was basically sounded like the council had a consensus of agreement on an action that should be taken in regards to a debt that was owed to the city. We don't take final action in exec session. That is not done. And I will vouch for every member around this. How?
We'll let her finish.
What's the point of order?
That was Alderman
I
McMiniman.
said you can finish.
Thank you.
And the mayor.
I'd like to know, that was not an action that we did. Executive session, no one around this council has taken final action in behind closed doors, because that's not how this council operates. We operate out here in the public.
So again, that's Alderwoman Conley asking some serious questions about how is it that details of an executive session got out in this Illinois Times article as they get ready to release the audio recording and transcripts of that executive session. We'll hear a lot more about this coming up here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. The Council Roundup brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to head west. We're hearing moments from last night's Springfield City Council meeting where you've got alder people upset that a story in the Illinois Times seemed to reveal details about a closed-door executive session from 2021 where they apparently discussed the prospect of waiving some of the penalties that the Wyndham City Centre had for not paying its utility on time. We've heard about this in the overall conversations about the Wyndham City Centre and whether or not the owner is going to sell to a developer out of New York and make some more residential units, or if they're going to keep it as more apartments. But here's Mayor Jim Langfelder responding to some of the questions that Alderwoman Erin Conley had.
What they print and what makes the paper and what doesn't is, unfortunately, or maybe it's fortunately, we don't control that.
But Conley wanted to get to the point of what exactly her concerns were at last night's meeting.
We're a public body and we take our final actions out here in public, for better or worse. But that was absolutely not the case. So
what's some of the other reaction here? You've got Alderman Joe McMiniman jumping in.
How can we be discussing about something that took place in executive session, and then she goes ahead and starts talking about the executive session?
No details
because
about
what
that
she
session.
said was she didn't think there was any consensus in that executive session. So I don't know, and I know you went and listened to the tapes yesterday. So I just think if we have to be consistent. If you're going to say we shouldn't be talking about it, then don't talk about it. That's the point I'm making. That's the point of order.
Well, Alderwoman Conley gave that response.
The only thing I gave was a general summary of the fact that this council does not violate the Open Meetings Act by taking final action behind closed doors. And if you want to point of order that's your choice.
Yeah, I'll point of order that as well.
Good. I'm going to go for
It's like a
three
ping pong match.
Yeah, that's fine.
You know what? No final action was taken. in that executive session, since you're bringing it up again.
So we agree with each other. This is good, Joe.
So we'll talk about more of what Alderman Joe McMiniman has to say concerning what his point was. But Alderman Hanauer chiming in here and raising substantial questions he has about this process of waiving debt and what happened with this closed-door session seeming to get out into the media.
We talked about a debt, and it was in the paper. And I guess my question is, when did going into an executive council to discuss something forego all our rules to where contracts don't have to be approved by city council? Because in a sense, that's what I feels happened here. Somehow there was an agreement of some sort. None of us have seen the agreement. We don't know when the agreement was. I went back and listened to the executive session. I also listened to the whole thing on the Wyndham. I'll never get those 2 hours back today that I sat through and listened.
Listen, hey, we had to do that ourselves, listen to it a couple of times. More from Alderman Hanauer.
That executive session was November 2nd.
21.
21. He came back, our first time we discussed a lot of it was July 19th. Now, I can't talk.
So he goes on more to address other concerns he has.
Apparently, there's been we gave in and had a contract of some sort for payment, a past due, and we never saw it. And I'm sorry, but going in there does not give anybody carte blanche not to bypass the city council. And that's the way I see it. And I would like to see the contract. I'd like to see when the terms of the contract was, because we talked about something on the 2nd of November 2021, and 8.5 months later was when everything came. And the conditions we talked about in November never happened. And that's a concern.
So, again, what we're hearing is a discussion about a closed-door meeting that happened back in 2021 about forgiving a debt of the Wyndham City Centre to the city's utility. And this was all part of more conversations that were had about what to do with the Wyndham City Centre in a large chunk of last year, if you remember that. A lot of time devoted to that here with the Council Roundup. And you can see previous conversations on the podcast page. But here we are now with apparently in the Illinois Times a story about this. And it seems to be dominating a lot of the conversation last night. Alderman Sean Gregory, though, he raised concern that this seems to be more of a distraction of sorts.
These type of things are slow us down, and it takes our focus away. And I just hope we can keep focusing on getting things done, because this is quite ridiculous. Thank you.
So how do politics play into all of this? We've got an election coming up in just a handful of weeks here before we decide whether or not Langfelder is going to have another term as mayor, or if challenger Misty Buscher, who's the current treasurer, will take over that spot. So we'll hear some of the questions and allegations that this is being politicized coming up next here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. I'm Greg Bishop, and the Council Roundup brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to head west. Their downtown location open for lunch. Head West Sub. All right, back with the Council Roundup, brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to head west. Their downtown location open for lunch, also open for lunch on Saturdays. And don't forget about delivery, Head West Subs. Reviewing last night's Springfield City Council meeting, which a lot of it was focused around a closed-door meeting that happened back in November of 2021, dealing with around $250,000 in penalties that was being waived for the Wyndham City Centre, and apparently it getting out in the Illinois Times, where the Langfelder administration said that there was a consensus And alder people pushing back, saying that wasn't the case. You heard from Alderwoman Connolly wanting answers. You heard from Alderman Hanauer wanting answers. Alderman McMiniman seeming to justify this a bit. And here's some of what he had to say yesterday at Springfield City Council meeting, which then brought on a response from Alderman Chuck Redpath and Alderman Ralph Hanauer. Here's Alderman Joe McMiniman.
I assume the story was initiated by the other candidate for mayor. And, the reporter's never going to tell us what sources of information he had about cancellation of debt or why this is now an issue that Treasurer Busher has decided to raise in a public way with the reporter. And I doubt that Treasurer Busher will tell us what she knew or what she disclosed to the reporter. So if our mayor and our city attorney get ambushed with information, of course they got to respond, but the best response is disclosure of the 10 minutes. And I'm glad it's going to happen because, no alderman spoke up during those 10 minutes except Alderman Hanauer and Redpath.
I did.
And it'll be very interesting to see how the public interprets your comments. You want me to say what I think you said?
Well, we'll just let the tapes speak for themselves, the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? I will say this.
So I'm still talking.
There was never a vote that we took back there, Joe. And
Well,
because we
I'm going to
can't.
say this. I still got the floor. But
Point of order.
You declined to answer the question, so I'm going to move on. What took place back there was, in my opinion, implicit authority for the mayor and the city attorney to handle a troublesome
That's
debt.
ridiculous, Joe.
Point of
Well,
order.
you can-
Point of
My
order.
goodness, would you stop?
The point of
Well,
order.
would you stop? Because
Alderman
9 more
McMiniman-
days and you're gone,
Alderman
Joe.
McMiniman has
Okay,
the floor.
let me just repeat
Alderman
what
McMiniman
Redpath
has the floor.
said.
So obviously getting a little bit heated there, and Alderman McMiniman, he continues on with more of what he had to say, with more response from Alderman Redpath and Alderman Hanauer jumping in back and forth. It's a pretty dynamite city council meeting last night.
We're touching some nerves here, and some folks
Because you're
don't
playing
like.
politics, Joe.
Let him finish, please.
Oh, so that story in the Illinois Times was not politics, huh?
I have no idea, Joe.
Oh, you don't?
No.
I'm surprised.
Do you? You think you do. You don't know. You make this crap up, Joe, and you expect everybody to believe
you
it.
keep grabbing the floor. You
Go
keep
ahead,
grabbing the
Alderman,
floor.
McMiniman,
So,
go ahead and finish, please, and then Alderman Hanauer on the point of order.
I think it's very positive that this council tonight is just going to release the transcript and let everyone draw their own conclusions.
And he goes on to talk more about the meeting.
The mayor and our attorney asked for feedback, and guess what? There was no pushback. There was no pushback against compromise and settlement of the debt because we thought the company was going to go into bankruptcy. And if it goes into bankruptcy, we'd likely get nothing.
Just announced everything that was in there.
Yeah, that's right. Because everyone else is talking about it. So,
We managed to not give the details out, Joe.
no, that's your opinion, and you're being inconsistent. So that's what
I'm
the
pretty
point of order
consistent,
was.
don't worry.
I'm glad he
Because-
can do it.
So McMiniman continues.
Conclude by saying I'm glad we're releasing this, and I think in conclusion also that I suspect candidate Busher was trying to make this politicized,
We'll
period.
actually hear from candidate Busher in a moment, but here's Alderman Hanauer.
I don't think we're that powerful to where two can count for 6. So I don't know where you said, how you get that gave implicit rights to do whatever they want and not bring it back to the council. You would be livid if you were against this. You would be livid.
Let me tell you something. Can I respond
You're
to
not,
that?
you don't have the floor.
Yep. Okay, it's
Jesus.
Corporation Counsel, you want to?
So obviously some passions brewing up over last night, especially as allegations of politics were thrown around and questions about what exactly the Illinois Times were able to get their hands on when you had the questions raised about this forgiving of the debt. But then you had Misty Busher, who addressed the council last night after her name was brought up. And this, of course, was after Alderman Joe McMiniman made an issue of it. But you had Misty Buscher get in front of a microphone and lay out what she has to say about the issue.
Thank you, Mayor Langfelder. I appreciate you acknowledging me to talk. Alderman McMiniman, this is specifically geared towards you, even though the chair is the mayor. This is a professional environment. We are not to talk politics in here, and I think we should uphold that professional environment as elected officials. Secondly, any monies that happen to go with the City of Springfield's FEIN number are the taxpayers' dollars, and the taxpayers are allowed to know what goes on with their dollars. Thank you.
So again, the treasurer, Misty Buscher, who is challenging the incumbent mayor, Jim Langfelder, wanting to sound off on her thoughts on this because her name was invoked in a political manner. Alderwoman Conley chiming in here on some other thoughts she's having.
As loud as you and Alderman Redpath can get, you do not speak for 10 people around this council. You don't. I know. You want to.
Dang it.
2 people on this council cannot, by any definition, become a consensus of this very diverse body. And the reason this is important is because it's the Open Meetings Act. I mean, that is a critical cornerstone of how public dollars and public actions need to be made. They need to be made in the open.
And she talks about how there were no votes taken at that closed-door meeting in November of 2021, and she wanted to make sure that was explicitly clear.
They came in and Wyndham paid their CWLP bill. I was never told that there was a reduction in that bill. We were never given an option to weigh in on a reduction on that. At some levels, I don't want to mess with the administration. Mayor, that is your job, and God love you, I wouldn't want it. But when we're talking about almost $250,000, $240,000 in fees for CWLP bills, that is a big enough issue that this council should have been engaged in. I mean, I brought this up just last week. I have constituents whose bills are high right now, who are experiencing real stress and duress because everything else has gone up. How does it look when we're giving a break to someone who still owns that building? It's not gone bankrupt.
It's an interesting question and something that Mayor Jim Langfelder responded to last night to some of the questions that were raised by various alder people over the issue of who made the decision to forgive this debt.
This council voted $1 million of relief to businesses, and we allowed CWLP to provide that. So,
all right, so that's one rationale. Another?
You have to look at the totality of the picture. Don't try to paint a picture, but look at the totality of the situation and the direction we moved. And so, we collected $1.2 million. I know that maybe it seems small to everybody around this horseshoe. Sure, not to me, especially, once the audio is provided, I think that's what will come out.
So a lot more expected to be heard about this as they prepare to release the transcript of that 10-minute meeting, and we'll see if we can get our hands on that and possibly work that in as a supplemental updates for a council roundup in the future. But that's all we got for today here with Springfield's Morning News. It's Council Roundup brought to you by Head West Subs. When you want a great sub, you've got to head west. Their downtown location open for lunch, Head West Subs. One last thing they did talk about last night was the issue of possibly having a resolution to bring about red light cameras. That's going to be a fun debate because there's questions of the effectiveness of red light cameras, but there's also questions about the ethics of red light cameras. So we'll have to have that discussion in a future day.